Let's get going in the Word. I like to honor your time. I hate to waste it, and I love to talk about Jesus. So you put those two things together, we get busy in the Word. I'll meet you in a moment in the book of Hebrews if you want to turn into the New Testament. I'm going to title this tonight, Structures in the Wilderness. I don't always give you a title because sometimes I don't have any idea what I'm titling, what we're talking about, until I put it online or whatever. But today I do want to title this Structures in the Wilderness, for the thought has been on my mind that there are no such things as structures in the wilderness, at least not permanent structures. If you look at the journey of the children of Israel, they always had temporary structures in the wilderness, no permanent structures. Everything they put up, they could tear down. Whether it was a tent or a tabernacle, whether it was the Ark of the Covenant on poles, God didn't build it with foundations. He didn't put it to where it would stay in the same spot. He put it to where it was always mobile. When you read the books of the Torah and you start to break down the ingredients, that's the wrong word, but we'll use it, of the tabernacle and all of that it looked like, everything that was in it, everything that was out of it, it always had a mobile aspect to it. God always told them how to tear it down, how to fold it up, how to carry it. That had to be a little discouraging. I never thought about this until recently. It had to be a little discouraged to Moses when God began to tell him about the tabernacle, because Moses caught on quickly. Everything moves. We don't ever get to sit down. Everything had a handle on it. You don't put handles on things you don't carry. Everything had a handle. Everything had a way to be packed up. Everything had a way to be folded. It had to cross Moses' mind. Why is he giving me portable stuff? Everything he's telling me to build is portable. That means I don't get to stay in any one spot. That means I'm always on the move. That means that whatever God's doing, he isn't done. And that means that can be good, because that means that whatever's happening, God isn't done. You go, well, this isn't the end, because we got to move this baby. But it could also be a little discouraging in that we're constantly on the roll. There's not a place to call our own. And so there are no permanent structures. We don't see a temple until we get past the wilderness journey. And I want to use that tonight. I want to use that thought, and I want to use that idea, but I want to frame it around something that's quite common to the Bible, both Old and New Testament. And that's the idea of the city, because the city, according to the Bible, is a place with foundations. The city is a place where you bring in multiple cultures, multiple tongues, you bring in different lifestyles, and you put them all in one place. And cities don't get up and move. Cities have a sense of permanence. To me, there's a fascinating narrative thread in the Bible. If you take the book of Genesis and then you take the book of Revelation, you got your natural bookends. Everything in the corpus of the scriptures fits inside of those two bookends. But it's interesting to me that when this thing starts in Genesis, what it springs out of is a garden. God puts a garden, and then rivers pop up out of that garden, and they flow and they feed the earth from this garden. We don't know how big the garden is. In fact, the Bible almost specifically never tells you. It's like it's not trying to identify this geographic location. It's trying to identify this spiritual condition, fertility, life. Out of this springs forth everything the earth needs, a garden. And then when you get to the end of the Bible, okay, here's our garden at the front. You get all the way to the end, God says to John the Revelator, do you want to see what it looks like at the end? You want to see the Lamb's bride. You want to see how this thing culminates. Husband and wife at the beginning in a garden. God goes, you want to see the husband and wife at the end? I'll show you the Lamb's bride, the new husband and the new wife. And it says, and a city came out of God down from heaven and rested, and it was called the New Jerusalem, and it was the Lamb's bride. And so Revelation takes what Genesis did, a husband and a wife in a garden, and jumps 66 books and God knows how much time, and puts a husband and a wife in a city who has the qualities of a garden. Because in the city, a river goes out and trees line both sides of the river. And everyone that comes into the city gets to eat the leaves and have healing in their spirit. And so the Bible's doing this on purpose. It's opening you in a garden and it's ending you in a city, because the garden has just two people in it who multiply and fill the earth. And the city has the whole earth in it, because God's end game is not just two people. God's end game is everybody that ever lives. That's why the city ends with its gates open wide and everybody's welcome. Come on in, come on in, come on in. It's not just a two-man garden. It's an every-man city. Now, there's a long and winding road that gets from Genesis to Revelation. In fact, that road doesn't happen quickly and it doesn't happen smoothly. In fact, as you leave the garden story in the book of Genesis, the city gets introduced in a very negative connotation. The Bible tells us that Cain built the first city. Cain was the first city builder. What else was Cain the first of? He was the first murderer. The Bible's trying to give you a very, very subtle, maybe not so subtle, hint as to why the city often feels full of vice and murder. Its father is Cain, and so the city goes down a rough road in the Bible. From Cain building a city, we get the Tower of Babel, the first city that tries to reach its way to heaven, and God scatters the tongue. And from the Tower of Babel, we get Sodom and Gomorrah, a place that doesn't know how to treat the stranger and the foreigner, where perversion runs amok, and there's judgment that falls on these cities. And by the time the Old Testament blossoms into the major prophets, the Isaiahs, the Ezekiels, the Jeremiahs, the city has become Babylon. Babylon means confusion. And the city is the place of the worst whoredoms and sin and violence and filth. And you go, wow, you would not imagine if you're in Isaiah that we're ever going to make this leap to Revelation where there's a city that comes down from God out of heaven. Surely what God wants to do is go back to where it was a garden, not go to where it was a city. But I love the narrative flow of the Bible. God gives up on nothing and He gives up on no one. And so God knows that there's a melting pot of people in the city. And Jesus comes along and starts weeping over the city and calls His disciples a city set on a hill that cannot be hid. And by Revelation, there's a new city full of a recreated people that God redeems and calls His bride.